So why is India important to you? Why are people saying it's a key place to go to? Well, it's politically stable, it's financially stable, it's got an independent judiciary, it's got a good record of law keeping, it's self-sufficient in the agriculture sector. It's one of those countries that if you wanted to do business with, you would do business. It's got an ideal sort of business market. And it's on track to becoming the 5th largest consumer in the world within the next decade. So if your product in any way is aimed at consumers, is aimed at people, India is going to be where your market is. And they have a great wish for global products. They like international products, they like quality products, so if that's what you're offering, whether it's a service or a car or whatever, there is a market there for you. Think at the end of that one, I said 10 years is no time at all for this baby that's been born. So you need to act small, you need to position yourself, you need to start getting into the market, you need to get your name known. It's no use turning up in 10 years' time and expecting to get a big market share. Somebody else will already be there. So you have to think of a long-term project. You've got to think of where will you be in India in 3 years, in 5 years, in 7 years, in 10 years, and plan your entry accordingly. Do some lateral thinking. Agriculture, you see. India needs to feed 23% of the world's population. They are feeding a quarter of the world's population. And you might think, well, I'm not involved in agriculture, but you may be. You may be involved in seed packaging. You may have something to do with tractors. You may simply be a trainer involved in vocational horticultural skills. You may make collection baskets for strawberries. There is a market for you in India. Think of the retail revolution. At the moment, the vast majority of purchasing in India is done through little corner shops, little small shops. You can literally have an egg delivered by the local corner store if you want. But that is changing. In 10 years, that will be quite different to what it is now. There will be large-scale purchasing consortia. There will be refrigerated delivery systems across the states. The advertising will change. Companies will need to have their brands established. That will require marketing and advertising. If you're doing that, there will have to be sales analysis figures. You will have to find out who you're selling to, who you're not selling to, why you're not selling. There will be a lot of background activity taking place. There will be a lot of sales training. There will be mergers and acquisitions which will need particular sets of skills. You will be looking at building a brand, not just across the equivalent of England, but you'll be building a brand across planet India. So all these skills, all these training, all the sorts of things that we are good at have value in India and will need to be pushed along as much as possible. So how do you do it? Well, there's no secret. It's going to take perseverance. You're going to have to be there in the long haul. If your MD says, well, I want results next year, then maybe you look at a different country, because you won't get results next year in India. But you will get them in 3 years, you will get them in 5 years, and they will be big, providing that you have done your research. India is different. Yes, it uses English as a common language, but it's a different country. The legal system is very similar to the British system, but it's not the same. So don't assume that it is. And therefore, you have to do your due diligence and you have to acquire local knowledge. Now, local knowledge can come from our commercial officers. It can come from the UKIBC. It can come from companies such as Ernst & Young, which have a big international presence there. But you have to acquire that local knowledge, and it will take time. You won't acquire it just by turning up on a flight, and if you do that, the potential for disaster is enormous. So you need to plan your entry into India as if you've planned nothing before. You will find that there are lots of different stages in how you will get into India, depending on what your product is. You may have a liaison office, you may have a project office, you may have a branch office, you may have a joint venture, you may have an agent, you may have a distributor. All these are clearly defined terms, legal terms in India. And liaison officers can do certain things, branch officers can do certain things, joint ventures are able to do certain things. The key is to know which is the most suitable for your product, your company at any particular given time. And don't assume that if you start with a liaison office, that's the be-all and end-all. It's not. The chances are the liaison office will fold within a year, and then you will perhaps open a branch office, and that will run for 2 or 3 years, and then you may look at a joint venture, or you may look at a merger. But there is a mechanism for your company at any point in your development, at any point in your journey into India. You will certainly come across PAN, P-A-N, a permanent account number, or you will if you want to avoid paying double taxation, because if you invoice an Indian company, they will almost certainly withhold some of that as a tax. Now, if you have a PAN, you will be able to have a certificate that says that tax has been withheld. And then you will be able to present that certificate when you submit your UK tax returns and allow it against your UK tax demand. But you must have a PAN to do that. It's not difficult. It's bureaucratic. So there are forms to fill in. There are procedures to follow. But in themselves, they are not difficult. And if you have at any time tried to help anybody fill in the forms for getting a visa to visit the UK, then you will understand that perhaps we have a common heritage in bureaucracy. They have a common root somewhere. The Indian civil service and the British civil service understand one another very well. But it's not difficult, it's just something that has to be done. And then you have possibly 3 levels of tax that you might be looking at. The Indian state government will tax you. The states will tax you. The local district that you're in may well tax you. And you have to pay them. There's no option, but you just need to be aware that the tax demands may be different in different states. And whereas in one state you may be taxed, in another you may get a tax incentive for the particular activity that you're involved in. There is talk that this will be harmonized, that some of these taxes will be merged into one common tax, but it will take time. It will happen, but it will take time. Labour laws, similarly, are complex. You need to consider them carefully. If you are getting into the business where you are going to employ somebody in India, you need to be aware what you are getting into. They're quite transparent in the same way that if you employ somebody in this country, that person acquires rights as soon as you employ them. The same is true in India. Different rights, so you need good local advice on what you can and cannot do. As I keep coming back to the fact that the states are all different. They're all at different levels of development. The tendency at the moment is for those down the western side to be slightly more advanced than the ones down the eastern side. And it may be that what we should do is look at some of those which are, if you like, ready. UKIBC lists 4 main cities, Pune, Ahmedabad, Chandigarh and Jaipur, and then another 5 as being particularly relevant. But what I thought I'd do is just have a quick look at Karnataka as being a state which is broadly similar to the UK. If you look at the land area, it's got 190,000 square kilometres. We've got 240,000 in the UK. It's got a population of 61 million. We've got a population of 64 million. The big difference, though, is in the literacy rate. We are up at 99% on the world ranking. They're down at 76. So if you think of the sort of standard normal distribution curve, we are up there at the top. They're on the upward slope. So they've got huge potential for development over the next 10 years. Huge potential in basic literacy and then following on from that in basic skills training and so forth. And if you're operating in the UK at the moment, Karnataka is almost an exact replica, but with another 20 years of development to go at. The domestic product is 90 million almost, 40 universities and countless numbers of colleges and training centres, almost 400 major research and development centres, and yet it still produces 70% of the coffee. So it's a typical Indian state. It's very technical. It's got good education. It's got population. It's got huge numbers of roads. 4,500 of national highway and 250,000 of local roads and so forth. Huge rail track. 5 airports. 11 ports. 50 million wireless connections. So it's a market the size of the UK, but still with potential to develop up to the sort of detail that we have. So your product, if it's doing well here, will do well in an Indian state. It will need adapting slightly, but by taking on just Karnataka, for instance, you have doubled, if you treat it as your another domestic market, you've doubled the size of your market. So if you are reaching saturation here, or if you're finding competition is difficult, an Indian state may well have the ability to suddenly transform your prospects. So it's not unreasonable to expect that in the next 10 years or so, the states, the individual Indian states, will each add a market the size of the UK to your potential sales patch. But it's not just one state, remember. There are 28 of them, and they're all at different stages in the development. So you've got half a dozen states which are ripe for development now and will keep you busy for the next 10 years. And in 10 years, there will be another 5 states that have come through to that stage, which are ripe for development. And in another 10 years, there will be another 5 states coming through in their development. And there's 28 of them. So you're looking at 50, 60 years of continual development of states which are ready and willing and able to buy your services and your products. So you have to think long term. You have to think, how am I going to take this forward? Where do I start? Which state do I start at? Which city do I start at? and take your way forward. Lots of useful websites, lots of advice. The key one, I think, to start with is UKTI.gov.uk, and especially your local international trade advisor, because they will put you in touch with both the commercial officers in country, with UKIBC, with people like Ernst & Young, with BDO in the southeast and elsewhere, who have specialist India desks. And hopefully you're now all fired up. Your next challenge is to get your Indian visa, and you need to take a little time to allow that to happen as well. But again, it's just bureaucracy. It's no different to our visas. Just follow the paperwork and it will be successful.